The chains were rusty and uncomfortable, and made his wrist itch. But they wouldn't be holding him much longer. Two guards pushed him up the stairs as they emerged from underground and up to the huge arena. He heard the crowd before he could even see them. They were stumping and chanting, "Bring him! Bring him!" The bright sun hurt his eyes. Being locked away in the dungeon for so long, he hadn't seen sun in a while. He forgot how intense it could be. He blinked a couple of times and let his eyes lower to the ground while he waited on them to adjust to the light from his body, the eyes still open. He had told the crowd he could sing. Ashik guessed the crowd hadn't liked his singing. The rich here loved to be entertained. They found their entertainment at the expense of others, usually the poor. They gathered around at executions, mainly of the innocent, who were given no fair trial. Instead, the king gave them some task, such as fight someone to the death, wrestle a huge snake, tell a joke. If the person completed the task and won the crowd's favor, they were allowed to go free. This was all a big, sick game to keep them entertained. Even when Ashik had been a free man, he never visited the arena, but he hadn't been free for a while now. "Ashik Hans Mansola," the announcer read loudly. "Age 27. Today he is here for neglecting his duties as the king's official. Ashik has been accused of letting several crimes be committed in his presence, but has done nothing to stop them." The announcer stopped reading and looked to the king, who sat up high in his private booth away from the crowd. The king nodded his head and rubbed his big white beard. He was an older man, at the age of 73. His fat, wrinkled face was caked with so much makeup to make him look decent that it kind of made Ashik laugh. He had forgotten how ridiculous the king looked. What he hadn't forgotten was how much he hated him. The queen sat next to him. Her beautiful eyes were down. She never did like these things. She had her black hair braided today. The long braids hung over her shoulder. Her beautiful brown skin glistened in the sun. The queen was known for her beauty. "Well, well, Ashik," the king spoke finally. "Neglecting your duties, huh? How disrespectful. I honor you with a title, give you riches and a nice home, and you neglect your duties. Were you tasked with too much? Was that it?" "I guess so," Ashik shrugged. He purposely did not address the king by your highness. There was nothing high about this lowly man. The crowd was rowdy. They all knew Ashik. Some had loved him when he was in position. Others had been jealous. But all wanted to get on with the outcome of this trial. "I should skip this and just behead you," the king said sharply. The crowd burst into yells of protest at the thought of skipping their entertainment. They all wanted to see him perform for his life. The king raised his hand to silence them, then turned his attention back to Ashik. "We all know you fight well." This elected more cheers from the crowd. "I will not have you fight today. No, that will be too easy. What other talents do you possess?" Ashik chose not to answer this question. He took this moment to stare at the king's son. He was a young boy of 7. He was ever so dear to the king, for he was his only son. Everyone said the boy looked so much like the queen. "Do you hear your king address you?" one of the guards said harshly, hitting Ashik on his cheek with the hilt of his sword. Ashik grunted and spat out blood. "I tell stories," he said finally. The king rubbed his beard some more. "All right, tell us a story. A love story. Tell us a great love story. If you impress us, then you may go free." He patted the queen's leg. "My darling loves stories." Some of the crowd let out sighs. They had been hoping to see him fight. There, the king said. "You've seen many fights today. Let's hear what Ashik can make up." "Very well," Ashik said, taking a deep breath. Then he began. "I will call them he and she, for there is no need to give them names. We live together. We die together, for I don't want to live in a world without you. The first time she said those words to her best friend, he was on what they thought was his deathbed. He was 10 years old and had gotten a really high fever and was unable to move or speak for 5 days. All the doctors had given up treatment, but she came to see him every day as soon as she awoke. She prayed by his side and held his hand. Sometimes she read him stories and played with his hair. He truly believed she was the reason for his recovery. His heart had pulled through because of love. Yes, he knew he loved her at just 10 years old. Adults laughed and said things like, "What do children know about love?" But he knew that his heart raced when she came into a room, that he could feel her presence, and when he did, it brightened his entire day. She knew that he listened to her, even though she talked way too much, that he made her smile, and that he encouraged her to be a better person. She had her entire wedding planned out, but things don't always go as planned. At the age of 16, she caught the eye of an elder rich man. This man paid her parents a high sum of money to marry her, and her parents agreed. If she had known beforehand that she was being sent off to be married, she would have run away with him. So her parents didn't tell her. Instead, they made up a lie for why they were going so far out of their normal route to the market. She didn't even get to say goodbye. When he found out about the marriage, he was furious. His parents told him, "Give it up, move on." There was nothing else he could do. But one who has tasted wine cannot go back to merely sipping water. She was his wine. She was his happiness. He could not live without her. So he worked hard. He saved every penny and then moved into the city. He impressed the right people and found himself working in the elder man's household, for the elder man had many household staff. He was given a menial job of watering the plants. The first time he saw her again, she was sitting in the flower garden, surrounded by her maids. She was playing a sad tune on the flute. The women stared in amazement at how well she played. Her beautiful eyes were closed as she focused on her playing. He sang the sad words that went along to the sad melody. Only he and she knew these lyrics. They had made them together when her pet bird had died. She looked up immediately and caught his eye. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, then looked away. "Take me inside," she told her maids. He was terribly confused. It was another week before he saw her again. This time, she had just got back in from her horseback riding lesson. He was given the task of putting away the horse. She whispered before he walked away, "We live together. We die together. I don't want to live in a world without you." Then, she discreetly slipped a note in his pocket. The letter gave him instructions on where to meet her. Later that night, they met briefly with the help of one of her maids. She told him she was still very much in love with him and suggested they run away together. For although she was surrounded by riches and wealth, she was very miserable without him. She had contemplated suicide several times, but she could not break her promise to live and die with him. She told him they must sneak out together, run away, and plan a new life far from here. But things didn't go as planned. Over the next 6 months, they made several attempts at escaping, but their plans were always met with some unexpected turn, causing them to be unsuccessful. In the meantime, the elder man noticed the talent of he and promoted him to a knight. He was soon sent off to war. The night before he left, the elder man was quite sick. Most of the staff was so busy attending to the elder man, they paid little mind to she. So she spent the night with he. Over the next month, he and she spent 2 hours alone together every other day, while he pretended to teach her music. But really, they used that slot to make up for lost time. Finally, she gave birth to a beautiful son. The elder man was very happy. He did not know this was the child of she and he. To him, This was his living legacy, and he threw feasts in his honor. Time went by, and she could no longer bear living this double life. She yearned to live with he and her child. She decided she would tell the elder man. She imagined his heart would melt at the idea of such a strong love, and he would let her go. So, one night she began to tell him her version of their love story, leaving the names out. She intended to reveal the true identities at the end, but he interrupted her before she could. "This is an interesting story, dear, but I do wonder how the husband will make them suffer when he finds out about their betrayal. Do continue." This stopped her. She changed the ending and decided against telling him. He would not be forgiving, nor understanding. She made the decision to poison the elder man, but when it came time to do so, she did not have the heart. Finally, she met he in the garden late one night. "I don't think this life is for us," she said sadly, "but I believe in the hereafter. We live together. We die together. We live again." She pulled out the poison she had intended to use on the king. He shook his head. "I believe in the hereafter too, but there will be no bliss for us if we take our own lives." Thus, the two decided to end their love story. She would try to love the elder man and be grateful for the time she had had with he, and he would find some other woman to give his heart to. This was extremely hard for he. He had been through war, endured stab wounds and arrows, but nothing hurt more than walking away from her. But he knew he must do it. He gave her one final embrace and walked away. They never saw each other again. Ashik looked up at the king, a sly grin on his face. The king's face was getting more and more red with fury as the realization hit him. His grip tightened on his chair, and he breathed heavily. The crowd was cheering, their signal for a job well done. The majority was deeply moved by the story, some even in tears. The king ignored them and looked to the queen, then to his son. He never noticed before how the child had so much of Ashik's features. He looked back to the queen. She looked back at him, her eyes staring through him. Then she stood up and joined the crowd in their cheer. This enraged him even more. No one else had put the pieces together. No, Ashik had told this story with details only the king would know. He could be merciful. He could set Ashik free. He could let the queen go, but his pride wouldn't let him. "Kill him!" he shouted. The guards looked up in confusion, for the crowd had approved of him being set free. Never before had the king gone against the crowd. "I said kill him!" he shouted again. He yanked the queen's arm and held it up. "Kill her too!" This was met by even more confused looks from the guards. "I said kill her, or I'll do it myself!" he yelled even louder. The queen didn't even tremble. Instead, she smiled, then called out, "We live together!" Ashik smiled back up at her. "We die together."